Ida Levin didn't live an unremarkable life. It was pretty normal. She was born in 1910, the daughter of a blacksmith. She was the second of 14 children, 11 who lived into adulthood. She married a truck driver named Ulysses Wesley Rogers in 1927 and became Ida Rogers. And in 1929, when she was a 19-year-old mother, she answered an advertisement to model for a painting for the Chicago artist Ivan Albright. This is Ida Rogers. Being that Albright was a native Chicagoan, the Art Institute of Chicago boasts the largest public collection of this particular artist's work. And I have personally visited the painting he made of Ida Rogers many times. I actually really like it. I should tell you before I show you this painting that everyone I've ever taken to the Art Institute has recoiled in not horror, revulsion, maybe, when I put them in front of it. So, remembering that the model was 19 years old, this is Albright's painting entitled, "Into the World There Came a Soul Called Ida." What is this? Ivan Albright spent 2 full years morphing this young wife and mother, this 19-year-old woman who Albright himself even called a very decent girl, into this grotesque hag? That feels like the right word. Is that mean? I mean, it's monstrous. Well, this painting, which is considered one of the artist's masterpieces, is a modern example of a vanitas. Vanitas. A vanitas is a type of still life painting from the 17th century Dutch style. They use symbols like skulls to remind us of the inevitability of death and change. Here's an example of a vanitas painted circa 1634 by Antonio Pereira y Salgado. So, good job, Ivan! Painting a 19-year-old looking like that sure is a reminder of the inevitability of death and change. Mission accomplished. Like I said, the painting took 2 entire years to create. Ida was quoted in an interview later saying he'd spend days and days on a little bit. He was very slow. And in the end, the painting was so transformed that it tells us very few things about Ida herself, except the peanut shells. Apparently, she would eat peanuts out of the shell while he was painting, probably to relieve the absolute tedium and boredom. It was a habit that infuriated Albright, but still, he painted in those peanut shells. So why did poor Ida have to sit so long? Well, Albright was disgustingly meticulous. Known as the Master of Macabre, he began painting in World War I by making medical drawings for hospitals in France. His technique is all his own. It consisted of creating numerous drawings, creating his own color palette, and painting with hundreds of little brushes. I read he would sometimes use a brush with only 3 hairs to create the level of just impossible detail he was interested in. Sidebar. If this story about an artist painting a beautiful young woman to look like a haggard old woman reminds you of another story about a beautiful young man who keeps a portrait of himself hidden away, the portrait growing old while he stays pristine, and his name is Dorian Gray, and this is a novel written by Oscar Wilde, nice associating. Albright was actually commissioned to paint the set prop for Albert Lewin's 1940s adaptation of The Picture of Dorian Gray. They ultimately didn't go with his painting, which is a bummer because it's freaking perfect. You can also see it at the Art Institute of Chicago. So, Albright was quite young and quite single when he was sitting for hours and hours painting the beautiful young Ida Rogers. Look, muses and artists, it's a long, almost tradition. It's a sort of rite of passage to fall in love with a muse, I guess, even if you're painting her in the image of a disgusting nightmare. Anyway, Albright wrote Ida a love poem. We know it started with the line, "'Tis Ida, the holy maiden I dream of, too perfect her face for the eyes of man, and ended with, I dare not look at her, for fear I portray, the emotion within me will lead me astray. And we don't know the middle of the poem because Albright gave it to Ida, and she very understandably started to giggle, and so he tore it out of her hands and ripped it up. That's awkward. That hurts the home team. So that's pretty much what we know about Ida. She was decent, she liked peanuts, and she accidentally embarrassed a kinda creepy dude once. But I will venture a guess that it was many, many years before she looked like this.